Welcome into Face the State, the show that focuses on all the issues that matter to you, both locally and across the state of Kansas. I'm Brock Wilson. Today we're starting off with a story that continues to make headlines this legislative session. Last week, Kansas lawmakers passing a bill that would require all people using public restrooms in the state of Kansas, that includes government buildings, local schools, to use the restroom that matches their sex at birth. The conversation now transitions to enforcement. How will the state make sure people are actually following this law? This week, Cale Chapman spoke with both LGBTQ advocates and a local defense attorney about how he foresees this being enforced.
They're threatening to hurt me for following this law.
Matthew Newman says the passage of Kansas's bathroom bill is already causing problems for transgender Kansans like himself.
I'm getting death threats because I'm telling people that I will be in women's restrooms, and I'm having men say, well, if you go into women's restrooms, I'm going to hurt you because you're not going to be allowed around my wife and my children. Because I don't think they realize that they are putting people like me with a big beard taking up space in the women's restroom.
The bill threatens anyone caught in public restrooms or locker rooms that do not match their assigned sex at birth with thousands of dollars in fines and misdemeanor charges. It also encourages Kansans to report anyone using the wrong restroom.
We're in a place that if you go to the restroom, you can be harassed for your documentation.
But the vague writing of the bill has many confused on its implementation.
What bathroom big brother have they appointed to oversee all these government bathrooms?
Especially when it comes to government entities enforcing the law.
Does it mean birth certificate inspections or driver's license inspections or background checks at the bathroom door?
And investigating to see if the accused actually committed a crime.
Could a judge even issue a search warrant for the kind of search that might be required to determine what the gender or sex of this person is? And might such a search so shock the conscience that no even warranted search would pass constitutional due process?
In Wichita, Cale Chapman, 12 News.
I want to bring in our State House correspondent, Sophia Jernander. Sophia, I'm interested to get your opinion on this. This passed a veto override, so obviously there are a lot of people in Topeka that support this, but they have to be facing a lot of questions, right? I mean, how have supporters of this bill been responding to that criticism?
Well, the bill's supporters have been wanting to pass this issue for some time, and their answer for this is that the bathroom bill protects women and girls, the privacy of women and girls in the bathroom. And as far as the driver's license portion of the bill, their argument is that it prevents criminals from being able to change their gender on driver's license, basically to escape the law.
Last week we talked about how when similar legislation was passed, it faced a steep court battle and was ultimately struck down. Now we're hearing the ACLU has entered into this conversation. They're representing two people that are actually suing the state of Kansas over this law.
Well, right. Two trans residents of Kansas have filed a lawsuit against the state. They're saying the law is unconstitutional, that it violates their rights to due process and freedom of speech under the Kansas Constitution.
And I'm interested, how you foresee this continuing to progress, because obviously you think about this going through the lower courts, and then we were even saying at our meeting this afternoon how this is likely to end up in the Supreme Court, right? I mean, I don't see how it could end up any other way. It seems like the ACLU is pretty dug in and willing to fight this till the end.
Well, right. They won a previous battle over a sort of similar law that was passed in 2023 that defined women by reproductive abilities, and that bill was attempting also to enforce sort of the bathroom issue and the driver's licenses, and the ACLU filed on that and they won that situation. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
It certainly has a lot of people talking. Let's now move on to a new topic we get to discuss here on Face the State. It's being called the clergy bill. It would require all clergy members, pastors, ministers to be mandatory reporters of sexual abuse. Sophia, tell us a little bit more about how that works.
So the law essentially works by training clergy to respond to reports of child or sexual abuse. So if they hear something like that, if they are told about it happening, they are bound by law to report this to law enforcement.
And the bill just passed through the Kansas House last week, but it's facing a bit of an uphill battle in the Senate. You mentioned namely from the insurance companies that represent churches. Why is that?
Well, they're mostly worried about the large settlements that would happen if the law was passed. That's sort of their main worry, and so they're sort of lobbyists for insurance companies that some senators are not entirely sold on the vote, I've been told.
But you mentioned that there was previously some issues with the churches themselves, but now they're getting a little bit on board, more on board, I should say, right?
Right. So the church's main concern was with private confession and sort of that the bill would be infringing on freedom of religion. And so the private confession works so that in the church someone can go to a pastor or a priest and confess, and that the churches are worried that if you report some kind of sexual crime in private confession, then people won't want to come to the pastor anymore. But there is an exception for private confession written into the bill, and so that opposition has mostly gone away.
And that was added in mostly in response to the concerns from churches, right?
Right. There's a lot of religious people who are involved in religious communities in the Senate, in the House.
Sure.
They've heard from these communities, and they pretty much figured they wouldn't get the bill passed unless they put that amendment in.
And this week you actually talked to an abuse survivor who's been pushing for this bill for years, right?
I did. Her name is Jo Chiray. She was sexually abused by her grandfather as a child. She reported this to her priest, and nothing happened. And she says her goal is to protect future Kansas children from abuse of this kind.
I want to listen to a part of that conversation.
I was actually ready to throw in the towel Wednesday, and had a few people tell me, don't you dare give up on this. It was such a great feeling to finally see all of the hard work that we've been doing for the last 4 years finally paying off.
The vote was 111-5. So on the surface, it seems like it would be a slam dunk. But as far as things go in the Senate, maybe not necessarily the case.
Right. I think the bill has been assigned to a committee. It doesn't yet have a public hearing. They're kind of fighting for that to happen.
Okay.
As I said earlier, it's sort of going to be fighting with these insurance companies. Maybe there will be another amendment added.
Okay.
If there's another amendment added, then it would have to go back to the House, so it might be sort of a back and forth process here.
What about the governor? What has she indicated with this?
I haven't spoken with her recently about this, but when I initially covered the bill, I received a statement from her office that basically said, she's been in support of sexual abuse survivors for years, and most of the opposition to the bill comes from the Republican side of the aisle, not the Democrats. So unless she has some crazy opposition to this, I can't see her vetoing it.
All right, we'll have to see how that plays out in the Senate. Moving on to something that affects us right here in Sedgwick County, Kansas lawmakers are discussing legislation that would modernize our tag offices. Anybody in Sedgwick County knows about the issues with the tag offices. We've covered that extensively on 12 News. Sophia, tell us about that bill. It looks like it was going to quickly be struck down in committee, but now it sounds like it may be moving forward, right?
Right, so the bill did technically die in committee last week, but then this week I was told that the bill was blessed, meaning it is allowed to continue outside of committee.
Okay.
And this is after conversations that Sedgwick County had with lawmakers, basically telling them you need to keep considering this issue.
Right. Let's get into a little bit about how the bill works. I mean, currently the way things are set up at the tag office, and this is why we had so many issues just this year, everyone's personalized tags are renewed at the same time in years that end in 0 and 5. That fell last year in 2025, and that created a huge bottleneck. The Sedgwick County Tag Office telling us there was a 500% increase in traffic this year, caused a lot of complaints. So how would this bill change that?
Well, it would essentially change it by, so if you get personalized tags, you don't need to get them renewed in years ending in 0 or 5. You would just need to get them renewed 5 years after you get them.
Okay, and that would obviously help that bottleneck, right?
Right.
Okay, this week you talked with Sedgwick County Commissioner Ryan Beatty, who's been very outspoken about the need to make improvements at local tag offices, pointing out, I mean, he's seen firsthand what people are having to deal with.
Well, right. Beatty's been pretty much the main spokesperson for this.
Sure.
He's been pushing it since last year. He says it's pretty unacceptable for the tag offices to function this way. In some cases, people having to take off work all day long just to get their tags renewed.
Let's take a listen to some of the testimony Commissioner Beatty made at a Sedgwick County Commission meeting last week. Then, Sophia, I want to get your reaction.
So which is it? Raise property taxes to do the functions or raise fees to do the functions, because people are demanding better service at the tag office. It is not appropriate to let people go to the tag office and get in line at 5 a.m. and take off a day of work to wait in line. That's not appropriate. That's terrible service. And if this was a private business, we would be out of business. But it's not. It's government. And they're compelled to use the service, and there's no urgency to fix it on behalf of the taxpayer. And that's what frustrates me, is because taxpayers and citizens have poor, piss poor service because the state doesn't want to help us do this job better.
Now, Commissioner Beatty obviously fired up over this. It's not typically easy to get a rise out of him, but it sounds like when you talked with him this week, he was a little more optimistic than he was there.
Well, right, he was. He thinks his conversations with lawmakers paid off, and he does want to point out that a lot of Senate leadership is from Sedgwick County. So not only does this affect their constituents, but they've likely had to deal with the tag offices themselves when they're back home in Wichita.
Obviously, that makes things easier to move forward whenever the lawmakers that are voting on this legislation see the issue firsthand as well. So you mentioned the legislation got a blessing from Senate leadership, meaning it moves out of committee. So what do you foresee happening from here?
Well, the bill was essentially assigned to committee of the whole, which basically just means that the Senate itself functions as a committee to debate the bill. I know that it was debated this past week, and I am anticipating a vote on it this next week.
Okay, that'll be interesting. Everybody in Sedgwick County going to want to keep an eye on that. That'll wrap up our State House segment, but we've still got a lot to cover. Just a few days away from the big 1% sales tax vote in Wichita. Maybe you're still on the fence about how you're going to vote on that initiative. Coming up, we're going to hear from leaders on both sides of the issue. Stay with us.